The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to our TPG Town Hall, where we're going to talk about automating your onboarding process using FileBound. This is the second of a four-part Town Hall series. Our next will be on December 2nd, where we're going to talk about contract management and e-signatures through FileBound. On December 16th, we'll talk about FileBound Connect, a new way to manage your workflow and your overall FileBound experience, a different way to utilize FileBound. And I also want to remind you that the previous town hall that was on October 11th is now available via recording that's on the APGL coding and is available on our website. My name is Jack Arnston. I'm one of the principals at the Priton Group, and joining me today is Bill Prahota, my business partner, JD Arnston, a senior systems engineer with us, and we're really excited to have Nathan Marinin with us. Nathan is with the Oak Creek Franklin Area School District, but previous to that was with Wauwatosa School District and was really instrumental in helping us put together this particular workflow in eForms. So we're excited to have him. For our agenda today, we're going to talk about how we came across this particular enhancement. We'll talk about the genesis of it. And then we're going to get a little bit under the hood and show you how it's actually built using the FileBound workflow, and in this case, the FileBound eForm module as well. After that, we're going to back out, and you'll see what the user experience looks like. So how it looks for both internal users as well as external users. And then we're going to have questions and a wrap-up at the end. Now, this is a town hall, and to do that properly, we need to have participation. So we would ask that you give us any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them. And there's two ways that you can do that. There is a chat area in the bottom portion of the GoToWebinar screen where you can type in your question and hit send. I'll be monitoring those questions and be able to ask them of the group. There's also the ability to raise your hand and ask a question, and you'll notice there's a little hand on the GoToWebinar interface with a red down arrow. If you were to click on that, it will change to green, and that will let me know that you have a question you'd like to ask. I will then unmute you and let you ask your question or questions, and we'll get them answered for you. The last thing I want to remind you is that we'll be recording this session, and we'll make it available to you. There'll be an email that will go out in the next day or two with a link to that. We'll also have a link on our website, so if you'd like to watch any or all of it, or share it with a colleague, you'll be able to do that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill and let him get started. Bill?
Thanks, Jack. Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about the onboarding process, and with our special guest, Nathan Marinin, we thought we'd start off with a couple of question and discussion points with Nathan to help us sort of get the stage for what we're going to show you today. And you'll see here, I said hiring and onboarding is hard enough. Try doing it during a pandemic. Well, Nathan and I really worked on this a good year to 18 months ahead of the pandemic. But in the context of the pandemic, the things you're going to see today, I think, are going to really have some hard driving benefits for you because of the unfortunate circumstances we're in with the pandemic and the distribution and the division of labor from being centralized in your offices out to remote locations. And so it just will hopefully show that that'll make it even easier for you. So to start with, I would like to welcome Nathan. And Nathan, if you could just take a second for us and kind of share with us some of the things that you were running into, some of the struggles and the hardships that you had to endure during the onboarding process, the way that you used to run it, and what were some of those things that then helped you to feel comfortable that you really needed to find a different way of doing it and approached us on that. So if you could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Working for Wauwatosa School District and transitioning into the Human Resources Department, I had inherited an already existing system of onboarding. And as I began to kind of understand and work through, a lot of elements presented themselves as kind of roadblocks in building the streamlined process. So, where we would be hiring employees, we would be taking a manila file folder, putting their onboarding paperwork in there. Then we would have to go back through the process and audit any of the documents. So there was just a whole lot of spreadsheets, a whole lot of folders, a whole lot of paper. And then in addition to that process, in order to kind of close out our onboarding situation, at a specific point in the beginning of the year, school typically starts in September. We'd kind of get our, new employee orientations going and kind of off the ground successfully. And then pretty much October, November, and December became known, jokingly as my scanning season. So that was taking all of those employees, all of those coaches, all of those new teachers, all of those aides, and individually scanning all of those files into our already existing FileBound retention system. So I had a conversation with Bill, and I just kind of said, hey, this really isn't working for us. We're, kind of wasting a lot of time in our current process. What can we do to kind of streamline and to have FileBound, kind of do the heavy lifting for us?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, and we certainly did come to meet with you, and we sat down and put together this solution. In fact, the solution we'll see today is ostensibly what was created with Nathan and the Priton Group team here. Although over the course of time, it has evolved, and what you're going to see here today is a little bit of an evolution of that process as well. But in the end, it's ostensibly the same type of a process that we put together. So, based on that, Nathan, then if you would secondarily share with us what you found to be the benefits. What were the things that really came through with this solution that you felt made a huge impact on your efficiencies and on the user experience and on your everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. We began to discover as we were working, it was really a first-rate solution. We eliminated all of the scanning that we needed to do because everything is kind of housed in FileBound in that onboarding workflow, if you will. And then when an employee kind of completes all of the paperwork, the internal systems do their checks, and then they migrate that folder over into like our completed key of folders for retention. So, everything was kind of easy in terms of sending out the paperwork to our new hires, collecting the paperwork, auditing it, seeing where they are in the process, what forms they still have, sending out reminders. All of that became automatic, which really kind of freed up our time in our office to better serve our employees with kind of more immediate or urgent needs. As I got in there and began to kind of play around with e-forms and kind of building things and making adjustments as our business services department would update a particular form, getting in there and kind of figuring out how to edit and revise was super painless. It was very efficient, and you're able to kind of cultivate that solid workflow. And then as you see how well it's working, you're like, how can I expand this to other areas? This is functioning so nicely and so kind of keenly in the onboarding experience for HR as well as the employee. We kept hearing tons of feedback from our new employees going, oh my gosh, that was so easy. Thank you so much for, kind of making it not an intimidating process. When you think of all of the hoops that a new employee has to jump through to complete insurance forms and beneficiary forms and employee information forms. So we were extremely happy with the workflow.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Nathan, for sharing that. I appreciate that. And again, as the questions come in, either during the presentation or at the end, if you have any questions for Nathan, please don't hesitate. From a user perspective, he brings a wealth of experience and information that he can share with you. So with that said, let's go and look at how the process was actually put together, both on the workflow side and on the eForms side. And to do that, I'm going to ask JD to step in and take control right now and kind of walk you through how that was actually put together. JD?
Yep, thanks, Bill. So I'd like to start with just a quick overview of the entire onboarding process. So we start off with an external application from FileBound. In this case, it's WeCan, where the application is generated and then is moved into FileBound. At this point, FileBound's workflow will then send out a welcome email, and that'll go to the new employee. This email will help walk the new employee through the process of filling out and submitting extra documents, which ultimately build out their employee file in FileBound. FileBound will then validate that all required documents have been submitted before ultimately creating that employee's new personnel file, which is also stored within FileBound. So here's an example of the workflow that accomplishes this that we set up with Wauwatosa. You can see from this overview that we have 4 main segments to the workflow. There's the initial assignment, a daily monitoring queue, a 7-day reminder, and the transfer of the onboarding documents to the employee's personnel file. So when the onboarding process initially starts off in FileBound, we first evaluate what type of employee is being hired. For teachers or administration employees, the process is handled by Dean. For substitute staff, the process is handled by Nathan. Both Nathan and Dean can add any additional documents and update and change the data associated with the new employee at this point in the workflow. So once everything is ready, either Nathan or Dean will kick off the process by sending out the welcome email to the new employee. Once the welcome email has been sent out, the workflow then enters a daily monitoring queue. Each day, Dean and Nathan check this queue to see if the new employee has submitted all of the required documents. If they have not, the workflow then lets them know what documents are still missing, and it stays in this queue. Documents can still be added by Nathan and Dean at this point, and they can still, again, make changes that they need to. Once the new hire has submitted all of the required documents, the process then moves on to its final stage. So while the process is still in that daily monitoring queue, we also have a 7-day reminder process. If the required documents have been submitted, the workflow will automatically push the new hire file to the final stages of the workflow. But if the required documents have not been submitted, after 7 days, a reminder email is sent out to the new hire and to either Nathan or Dean. From here, Nathan and Dean can also contact the new hire and walk them through submitting the required documents. And it's also worth noting that the number of days at which the reminders are sent out can be customized depending on the solution, so you're not bound to 7 days. It can be more, it can be less. And finally, once all of the required documents have been submitted, payroll and operations will receive an email letting them know that the new hire's file has been completed and is ready for review. The documents are then also moved over to the personnel project in FileBound for general retention and viewing. So that covers the workflow side of it. And the other main component that we have in addition to workflow is FileBound's eForms. To start, we wanted to first walk through the eForms designer and its tools. FileBound's eForm designer allows you to drag and drop an assortment of tools onto the form itself. And these range from text boxes to date fields, signatures, buttons, formatting options, as well as a whole host of other options that you can drop on there. In this new employee data sheet, you can see that we've used standard text boxes as a means of collecting all of the necessary data for new employees. We can also set certain fields, such as employee ID, to required so that the form cannot be submitted without certain requirements being met. We also have other elements such as radio and checkboxes that also require input. And we also have some more administrative functions available in the form settings area that allow us to further customize how forms are handled, both in FileBound and in the workflow. FileBound's eForms also allow for additional configuration outside of the designer. In these settings, we can set the form name, we can choose to route the form down specific workflow processes, and we can also set the form's separator and divider for when it's created in FileBound so that the workflow can check for the presence of these documents. We can also customize how the forms appear in your FileBound Forms portal by grouping forms together into categories. Forms can also be set to several different security options in the portal. There are public forms, which can be accessed by anyone with the correct link. There are forms that are secured by an access code, and there are forms that are secured by FileBound login. The success page is the page that's displayed back to a user once they've submitted a form. So we can also customize this page to allow for a unique success page that allows new hires to submit additional required forms after they've completed one form. And we can also do lookups in eForms. This allows us to do a lookup to our onboarding project in FileBound and pull back an employee's information by matching on their employee ID. This allows us to speed up the process of filling out the new hire forms, and it also just protects us a little bit from fields being entered incorrectly or fat-fingered. And then in addition to creating eForms from the ground up, we can also create eForms from existing PDFs, such as government or insurance forms. We simply overlay the index fields on top of the PDF, which allows it to be filled out from FileBound's Forms portal. So from there, I'm going to hand it over to Bill, and he's going to walk you through this whole process in action.
Thanks, JD. All right, so let's take a look at the workflow as it would appear both to Nathan and Dean as well as to the new hires. So it starts with the application, and WeCan is an application that is available to the school districts. They pull in that application, and then we focus on the profile section of the WeCan application, where we were able to automatically extract all the information like the name, the phone number, the email, their address, city, state, and zip. And we were able to grab that information and then place that into the file in FileBound and then bring over the PDF and store it. And then that kicks off the workflow. Now, in this case then, when Nathan would log into his FileBound site, he would go to his login page and he would see all of his assignments. And as you can see, the assignments have a status of initial review and assignment out to the new hire. Now, at the same time that this kicks off the workflow, then it also sends a new hire email out to Nathan to let him know that this individual has been put into the workflow. The form has been submitted in for WeCan. And as you can see here, it sends the email with a view assignment. And when they click on the view assignments, whether it's Dean or Nathan, then it would take them to that file in FileBound for that new hire. So as you can see here, there's the WeCan form that was pulled in. The data was extracted, placed into the file details, and then you can see the WeCan application is in place and is in the workflow. Now at this point, Nathan can add more information to the file details. For example, they might add the employment type, might add the location, might add the starting date, might change or update information, or could add information to the notes that could be included as an insert into the welcome email. So at this point, when Nathan is ready, or Dean or anyone is ready, they can then press the send new hire email. At that point, the new hire will be contacted, and this is what they see. They will receive an email that has the instructions, as well as the identification of their placement or their location, their rate of pay, their start date, or any other unique information that they may have put into the notes. And then, most importantly, in terms of moving this along through the process, they're sent the forms link to the portal, as well as their employee ID. And then they're instructed to click on the forms link and to use their employee ID to help fill out the fields or fill out the forms. And so when they click on the link, this is where they're taken. They're taken to the new hire forms category on the portal, as JD had showed you how we can configure that. And then if they were to select the form, for example, I'm going to select the employment information form and open it, this is what they'll see. Now, this form is how it would appear if you're on a phone, a tablet, or a PC. So they can be filled out on any one of those formats. And for the forms or for the phones and for the tablets, we also have the same kind of form, but it can be created as a responsive form. So we have the ability really to create some very powerful dynamic forms. So as a new hire in this case, I was instructed to use my employee ID. So what I'll first do is I'll enter my employee ID, and then when I tab out, you'll see that we did a lookup to fill in the information that was already collected as a part of the WCAN application or as part of the preparation that Dean or Nathan put into the file before the email was sent. And then there is additional information that could be added, like birth date, first day of work, emergency contact information. I can also, or actually required, that they check on their Wisconsin retirement system, yes or no's. So it did that. And then they can sign it either with a pen signature that can be done on the phones or the tablets with their finger or a pen, or they can simply type their signature. And then when they're done, they can hit the submit button, and that will actually load that document into FileBound into their existing file, because that's already been created via the WCAN application. So when that's done, and over the course of that 7-day monitoring period of time, Dean or Nathan would log into the system, and they would find that record, and they would watch and see and sort of monitor all the documents that have been added to the system by the new hire over time. And as you can see here, we have a number of files that have already come in: the Employment Information Form, Confidentiality, EEOC, and you'll see that there are 2 copies of the documents. One of them is the e-form that was originally sent and submitted, and the other is the PDF version of that e-form as a final document that will eventually be moved into the personnel file when the workflow is complete and the file has had all the required forms added to it. So in this scenario where Nathan and Dean were monitoring the file, they can either allow it to go its normal course and be reviewed every day automatically by the workflow. And if the workflow saw that all the documents were there, then it would move it on through the workflow automatically for them on a day-to-day basis. However, if Nathan were to go into the file and find all the information and say, yes, I believe all the documents were there, then they could come over to the required documents check, click that button, and the system would check and validate that all the documents are in the system. Those documents then would be bundled up, and the final steps of the workflow will be continued. However, in the scenario where, for example, there aren't all the documents and either Nathan missed one or he simply wanted to know which ones were still outstanding, he can click on the required documents check. And if it was missing a file, he would receive an email. And that email indicates that there are missing documents, and it would say, Nathan, that Bill Perhota's file is missing a document. It would actually show him which document or documents are missing out of the ones that are deemed as required by the workflow. And so from here, then, Nathan can get in and connect with the new hire and make sure that all the documents are filled out, submitted, and that the form is truly complete. So when that's done, then the last step of the workflow, as you saw from JD's explanation, is that the operations team, payroll, and anyone else that needs to be notified is notified that the file has been transferred to the personnel file, and that they can now do what they need to do to continue the onboarding process within the personnel file. So in this case, you'll see that we are now in the personnel file, and if we type in the employee ID, there's the record that's been transferred over, the data as well as the documents. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the documents, all of them have been transferred, but only the PDF version. So the final copy of that document is in the personnel file and is ready to go. So that would actually complete the new hire onboarding process. We talked a little bit about also showing the vendor onboarding, because there are so many parallels between the two in terms of being able to notify and provide emails with links to the e-forms and have the e-forms fillable and submittable to start filling in the vendor onboarding project. But one of the things that we found during the process of putting this presentation together was that the employee onboarding process was so complete, was so comprehensive, that it was going to take up the vast majority of our presentation today. And rather than kind of pushing in the onboarding for vendors, we thought that what we would do is in January, we are going to present the vendor onboarding, vendor file, vendor maintenance webinar. And in that webinar, we're going to discuss the vendor onboarding in detail so that you can see the benefits that it provides. It too is fairly comprehensive. And so we felt that it would be really good for us to extend that into January and cover it at that time. However, as a bit of a teaser, we thought we'd just real quickly discuss some of the benefits that we're going to see for the vendor onboarding. So intentional vendor selection and onboarding is one of the steps that you'll take. And that's one of those, that's kind of a normal step, one we expect to have happen all the time. Somebody makes a request to bring on a new vendor, and then you go through the process as normal. But there's also times when there's unexpected vendor onboarding. Somebody makes a purchase and goes sort of outside the norm, either because they have to or because they didn't want to follow the rules or they didn't even know the rules. So the unexpected vendor onboarding would allow us to then send the vendor the information form they need us, that we need them to fill out, including things like the W-9 form. And then finally, there's the vendor account and file maintenance. So there's times when you need to get updated W-9s. There could be contact or account changes and updates that need to be made and forms that need to be distributed. And that all goes and speaks toward vendor onboarding and the vendor relationship over time. And then the banking information, such as ACH, may need to change and may need to be updated. So over the course of time, this whole vendor relationship begins with and continues on through the vendor onboarding process. So look for that in January. We're very excited about being able to present that. So the last two things I'll show you are just those forms that we could create for vendor onboarding that sort of mimic what you saw with the human resources employee onboarding. One is a supplier information form. This is one that was created from the ground up. So we started with a blank sheet of paper. And then the W-9 is an example of that PDF form that JD had mentioned, where it's a federal form. We can't change it. We have to deal within that. And so we're able to overlay our fields, allow that document to be filled out and submitted. So we can handle predefined forms as well as designing your own from the ground up. So Jack, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you for any additional questions that might have come in.
Thanks, Bill. And just a reminder that if you have questions, you can either raise your hand or you can type them in the chat box. I do have a couple that came in. The first one is going to be directed to Nathan. Nathan, this is actually, there's two questions here. The first is, did you get much pushback from new hires with this process? And did they have many questions about filling out the forms?
Yeah, not at all in terms of pushback or confusion in terms of filling out the forms. You know, we were able to customize the kind of welcome email that kicks off the whole employee experience. So we were able to provide very clear directions in terms of you're going to use your ID here, you're going to click on this portal, and then you're going to fill out the forms. What can be auto-populated will be auto-populated for you, and then it's your job to fill out the rest. You know, we would get feedback from, let's say, former employees who had worked for us at one point and then left the district and were coming back. They were coming back to a whole new onboarding process. A lot of them were kind of fearful in terms of the huge packet that they would historically give them to kind of go through, and it would take kind of forever. You would go to the human resources department, sit in a conference room, and kind of bang out that paperwork. Here, it was kind of at your own leisure. It was, you know, from home, and you really had a positive experience in filling out what you needed to fill out. A lot of it was already pre-done for you, pre-populated, and then you're just hitting submit. So the majority of the feedback that we got was exceptionally positive.
Great, thank you. JD, here's one for you. It says, can we use our current DocuSign account to have people sign the e-forms?
Sure. Yeah, you can. There is definitely built-in integration in FileBound with DocuSign, so that is certainly possible, and this process can be tweaked to accommodate that. Without getting into it too much, I will say that our next webinar in 2 weeks does focus a little bit more on integration with DocuSign, so we'll cover that kind of idea a little bit more at that time. But short answer is yes.
Thank you. And then, Bill, I've got one here. It says the example that you showed appears to be very specific to the needs of the school district. How flexible is the workflow to make this more appropriate for my company?
Sure. It's very flexible, and they are right. This was specifically focused on school districts, and because of being in Wisconsin and being able to use WeCan, we had that application readily available for us, so we didn't have to perpetuate the concept of them filling that out and moving that document in. So there are some benefits to that process. But from a flexibility standpoint, we can definitely customize the workflow to be specific to your company. For example, you might have more stops along the way for individuals to review the forms. You might have more participants than just, in this case, Nathan and Dean. That's perfectly fine. That's not a problem at all. There may be different kinds of documents, and there may be the need to route documents differently before they are put into the personnel file. So not a problem. We can customize that entirely. We basically start from the ground up, and we can build it specific to your needs.
Thanks, Bill. With that, I'd just like to remind you that we've got a couple more town halls that will be coming up. The next one's going to be on contract management through FileBound, and that's going to include the e-signatures like JD just described. That's going to be on December 2nd at 10 a.m. And then on December 16th, we're going to have one on FileBound Connect, a new way to manage your workflow. I'd also like to remind you that the previous town hall that we had, the advanced GL coding within FileBound, is now recorded and available on our website. That can be found at PritonGroup.com under the accounts payable landing page on the website. So with that, one other thing I'd like to remind you is that, or let you know of, is that something that's come up over the course of the last 6-7 months as people have been dealing with stay-at-home orders and working from home is better ways to outsource, better ways to manage their vendor invoices that are coming into their system. A lot of organizations we work with use our technology to manage the approvals of their workflows. And the one Achilles to it is that they had to have people come into the office to enter the vendor invoices into the system. Well, I'm excited to announce that we now have a service that will take that burden away from you, and we will handle that for you. And so we can get your invoices, whether they're electronic or paper-based, and we can put them into the directly into the FileBound workflow, or we can put them into a format that can be imported back into your ERP system. So I just want to mention that. If you have any questions on that or would like to learn more, you can email us at sales@PritonGroup.com or give us a call at 279-4088. So that's it. We appreciate you guys hanging on with us. Hopefully this information was of use. If you get any other questions, just let us know. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.